hope it's working. All right. Um, YouTubers, if you're just joining in, I ain't gonna hold you. The computer was acting stupid, and I didn't have the patience. So I already started the live, but we're in chapter 5. We have, just to give y'all a quick synopsis, we only a couple paragraphs down, and we are doing the review of the history of trust from England to America, and we're getting into the idea that, well, first coming from the idea that in England, the land was owned by the landlords, but a landlord could die, and then he would have a will, and then eventually the idea developed into having someone who you could trust, who could work the land for you and make sure that the benefit goes back to your people. And that idea made its way to North America. So here we are, the Massachusetts Trust. Here we go. So, um, we said the trust gave them a way to pool their resources without having to deal with state imposed controls and burdens. Some trusts currently in the United States have existed longer than the country itself. They provide benefits to countless heirs, beneficiaries, as well as main communities. By using common law trust and not government granted charter, a trust operates with greater freedom and far more privacy. By providing a common vehicle for the self interest of its beneficiaries, the trust teaches the lessons of interdependence, cooperation, and working together for the common good. The Privy Seal and the Queen. Queen Elizabeth I was notorious for robbing her subjects of their money. Whenever her spies discovered a merchant made a profit, she immediately sent agents to borrow it through an agreement known as the Privy Seal. She never paid back any of her debts. Historians, oh, let me go down to the note. That's note number 20. Agnes Strickland, Lives of the Queen of England from the Norman Conquest, Volume 16, Chapter 8, page 208. George George Barry and Sons, Philadelphia, 1903. So yeah, the Queen didn't pay her debts back. Historians note that this practice contributed to keeping the feudal system in place during her entire reign. So the land itself, the society itself, could not move forward because she was robbing her own people. Those subjects had the ability to create riches. I'm sorry, those subjects who had the ability to create riches either hid them well or left England. Note 21, Strickland. Throughout many successive reigning monarchs, English subjects also learned to stay out of the way of the king or queen's progress through the countryside, as the royal armies had the habit of raping and pillaging. Oh, I can't say that word on TikTok. Sorry, TikTok. They had the habit of graping and pillaging both land and people. When residents of towns close to the ruler discovered the the retinue was traveling, they fled before the ravaging armies. So this is again Strickland, from the Lives of Queens of England from the Norman Conquest. So basically, since they've had this is the writer saying that basically since they've had their monarchy, this has been the way it goes. That the monarchy just takes from the people and woo, does horrible things to them. So this is seen to be their norm. Early American trust. Later in Pennsylvania, hold on. Oh, I skipped over. Hold on. Historians note that this practice contributed to keeping the feudal system in place during her entire reign. Those subjects who had the ability to create riches either hid them well or left England. Thus, the monarchy unintentionally contributed to developing trust among rich private citizens to protect assets by the clergy. Early American trust. Later in Pennsylvania, Governor Robert Morris of the Virginia colony, an English born Philadelphia banker, a member of Congress, and a financier of the American Revolution, set up a trust named the North American Land Company, which remains in existence today. Dude, that's crazy. Similarly, Patrick Henry also set up several trusts which are now more than 250 years old. Wow. The descendants of these famous patriots, some of them still in leadership roles, achieved durability for their family trust by carefully training each successive generation to understand and apply sound legal and financial principles to trust management. As reported in the Chicago Tribune, um, Chicago Tribune, March 22nd, 1947, the Chicago Merchandise Mart is a pure trust established by Joseph P. Kennedy. John D. Rockefeller established more than 270 pure equity trusts, which kept his vast empire sovereign beyond the reach of inheritance taxes and other government intrusions. So let me finish before I comment. Okay. The US government itself allegedly created thousands of trusts, including the US Constitution, Medicare, and federal highway programs. The latter fact posted on highway signs along interstates, especially during times of construction. We all know that administration skills allow a trust to continue. We devote many pages in Volume 2 to this subject. There it is again, that Volume 2. They've been quoting that all through this book. They've been talking about Volume 2 as if though we need to get it. Okay, so this is the next. So we're coming up on the next section. So let me comment on the last section. It's just my opinion of the reading. Okay, so earlier in chapter 4, they described to us how a trust functions like a business, right? And just now, it said that the early patriots who established the United States, or established at least those colonies, to be a sovereign entity, it just listed the Constitution, which is very, very interesting because to me, and this is my understanding, your business has to have a similar document, and your trust must have a similar document, basically outlining the purpose of the trust or the purpose of your business. They call it a business plan, right? And then what you plan to do, how you plan to achieve those goals. So the trust has that, a business has that, and the United States has that. I never looked at it that way, though. I would have never looked at the founding fathers as establishing a trust. But as I'm reading this, it kind of makes sense because the Constitution is what you're made of, right? That's what the word means. And inside of their Constitution for their union, I mean, there was only 13 colonies at the time, but the idea was this union, right, can grow based on these founding principles. And it went from 13 colonies to eventually stretching across the whole northern continental United States. That's crazy. But it just started as a trust. The more you know. Okay, so let's see where we're at. I wonder why they said allegedly, though. Why I say the U.S. government itself allegedly? Why is it alleged? Oh, I'm going to answer my own question. Alleged because trusts are private. The only way I could find out that you had a trust is if you did something illegal, or you did something and someone tried to sue you, or bring you to court or whatever, and then they find that they are having a hard time doing that because you yourself don't actually have anything because you're just a beneficiary or a trustee or something, some part of this trust. So then that would make people then say, well, how is this person doing this? And then try to find it out that way. But if that doesn't happen, if instead of coming after you, they're coming to you to be employed by you because your trusts are churning out businesses or churning out things that are profitable, no one would ever ask the question. They'd be too busy being profitable. So that just seems really interesting to me. All right. Now, where do we go? Dark side. Let's see what this one's about. We should seriously, well, let me read it first. Let me just read it real quick. Hold on. Okay. We would be seriously lax, though, if in our discussion of trust, we fail to discuss the other darker side. This is a story not only of relentless, multi-generational aggrandizement, but of the manipulation and direct involvement of the US government in support of that agenda. Uh-oh. It looks like they're trying to criticize the US government. Here we go. Let's see what they say. The resultant chapter in this nation's history became so black that learning about it is compulsory for the US school children to this day. Further, it would be fair to say that let me read that again, sorry. Further, it would be fair to say to many, this is the word quote unquote trust means at a visceral and emotional level. In the late 1800s, a certain major American industrialist developed the practice of concentrating their assets into associations or quote unquote combinations in restraint of trade. Unfortunately, for the reputation of trust, these individuals twisted the long established trust methods into a new shape to reach their goals. Though termed quote unquote trust and outwardly imitating the traditional pattern, in reality, the conglomerates they created violated the basic ethical purpose of trust, to care for the family. They poured their immense resources into the petty games of self-protection and self-aggrandizement at the expense of other people. These brilliant but short-sighted industrialists fixed monopolies, manipulated material costs and product prices, nullified free market competition, corrupted the media, and dominated Congress. And the footnote is Honorable E.R. Ridgely, Democrat from Kansas, anti-shyster news magazine, quote unquote, Title Wars, Volume 8, Number 2, page 20. As we've seen before that period, trusts were used by the private sector as a shield against the abuse of kings, queens, and legislators, not as a cudgel to smash business rivals. Yet, as the industrial age technologies concentrated increasing amounts of power in the hands of ever few men and corporations, Lord Acton's maxim, quote, power corrupts, end quote, took a new turn. Instead of consolidating their power in the private sector to stabilize families and provide better service to their customers and the community, they abused their positions, crushing competitive initiative and reducing service quality to end users. Clearly, government intervention was justified, and it had to come from the federal level. The shift of power out of state houses into boardrooms was carried out by several of these associations, whose influence now crossed not only state borders, but national ones as well. Increasingly, excuse me, sorry. Increasingly independent of local markets, regulations, and boundaries, these would-be masters of the universe gave the time-honored techniques of trust new roles never intended by their predecessors. Seemingly over the financiers' objections, and despite their ability to buy votes, Congress passed the quote-unquote antitrust laws, banning monopolies. Predictably, the executive branch failed to carry through and enforce them, as shown by the fact that we still have an oil cartel, and few industries show true competitive pricing. In large cities, the overall trend is that mom and pop stores have been driven out of business by larger chains whose volume buying power results in pricing significantly lower than individual stores can offer. Let's see. Should I go? Okay, so yeah, let me just sum up this last paragraph. This is my interpretation of the reading. This is not advice or any of that nonsense. So it seems as if though what the writer is saying, Mr. Charles is saying here, is that the trust is a powerful instrument, wealth building instrument, right? But it was traditionally used for families. Again, coming from England and coming from the rule of the king and the queen, who was just basically doing whatever they wanted to do with your finances or your estate. Because at this time we're talking physical land, right? So physical land over paper money. That's what it was. Until that wealth started to stockpile, and then we started to have these things that we use today, so that store wealth. So coming from that place where they could just do what they want to your land, do what they want to your body, they started to come up with ways to maintain their wealth and protect their bodies from the authority. And at that time, the authority being the king, right? And the queen. So these methodologies grew from that oppression, from that financial oppression of the king and queen. However, once they got free of the king and the queen, they themselves became the power. And with that power, they became corrupt. So although initially the idea was we need to have a way to protect our wealth from these corrupt and powerful king and queen, once they figured that out, we can use trust. Well, then they started to become so powerful, they said, well, who's going to stop us? Because we basically made a system that says the government can't stop you, right? So and this is, I'm guessing, talking about the robber baron era. I'm guessing that's what they're talking about. These companies basically, like they said, manipulated the market, whereas the market would say, you're selling water, it's summertime, you're hot, you're out there, you're selling those little bottled waters, right? Those little bottled waters are cold and they usually be like $1 or whatever, right? But let's just say for some reason, the price of purchasing those waters go up. Well, then you can't charge $1 no more for those waters because it costs you too much, right? But let's say the reason why it went up is not just because more people started wanting water, but let's say the price went up artificially because the person who manufactures the water or gets the water into the bottle for you, let's say they own all of those plants where you bottle the water, and there's no competition. They can say, listen, the bottled water is whatever I say it is, because there's no one to compete with them. There's nothing to say, well, it shouldn't be that price. But if you have multiple companies competing, then each company will say, They will find what the actual market is willing to pay simply through pure competition. Because you'll go to the store, you'll see that bottle of water sitting there, it'll be $50, and you will walk right past it. And then you go to another store, it'll be $48, you'll walk past it. You get to another store, and it's 25 cents, you're going to buy it. And then you're going to go home, you're going to tell all your friends. You're going to tell your friends, go to this store, it's 25 cents over there. That's natural competition, market competition. You are the market. You decide what the price is, right? That is natural. However, what's unnatural is when there is no competition. And this is what those robber barons were doing during that time. They built the industry. So once they built the industry, similarly to what's happening today in the tech industry, if I built all of the parts of it, then I control every part of it from the bottom to the top. I tell you, the end user, what the price is. You don't tell me what the price is. Because there's no part of it in which you can compete with me. There's no part of the building of this thing, whether it be a bottle of water or a computer, whatever it is you're doing or you're producing as a product. If you control every single part of it, you can decide what it is. And that's that's called a monopoly. So then at that point, yes, antitrust laws came into effect. The government said, listen. Not trying to get in your business. We get it. We was established by mind your business. That's what started this thing, right? It was about their business. But you cannot harm people. You cannot make your business in such a way that it's harming everyone around you. And that's what the antitrust is about. All right. So, on their face, these laws appear to be straightforward. Genuine examples of the democratic process at work, embodying the masses' demand to curb big money's abuse of power. Public outrage was present, doubtless further inflamed by the hired pens of William Randolph Hearst and other quote-unquote yellow journalists. At least some of the members of Congress who proposed and passed the trust-busting legislation had different motivation from the voters. Oh, wait a minute, read that again. Read that whole thing again. Sorry about that. Public outrage was present, doubtless further inflamed by hired pens of William Randolph Hearst. Hired pens. Listen to that. Hired pens. I mean, someone was paying them to write this. And other quote-unquote yellow journalists. Yellow journalism is, again, this is the industrial era. This was the first time people began to, like I said, buy everything. So what they could buy now with their money was they could buy publicity. And how you do that is you go over to the guy who normally just tells the news and you say, listen, stop talking about what's happening every day and start talking about my business. Or stop talking about my business. My business is hurting people and I need you to stop talking about it, okay? And I'm going to pay you to stop talking about my business. They were called yellow journalists because at that time, journalism was held at high esteem. Writing the truth was an important thing. And that went away with money because you began to write what you were paid to write. This was the beginning of it. That era, the industrial era was the beginning of it. So that's why they're giving you this guy, William Randolph Hearst, and telling you that he was a hired pen. At least some of the members of Congress who proposed and passed trust-busting legislation had different motivation from the voters, though. Like lawmakers in other areas of the democratic government, they followed the theme, government is the art of extracting votes from the poor and wealth from the rich by promising to protect each from the other. The attention made lawmakers take seriously their duties as public servants. They took action against the real danger posed by giant industrial trusts to the economy and to the nation, thus winning the vote of the little man. In reality, they provided those same wealthy captains of industry with federal firepower to blow their competitors out of the water. Even though it appears that the separate companies became different oil companies, they have not competed. They did they what? Even though it appears the separate companies became different oil companies, they have not competed. Do they fight amongst themselves? We think not. Okay, so what they're saying here is that this was a perfect opportunity for politics because the people are being done dirty and they're mad, and the rich people are getting richer by doing the people dirty. So they only care about their bottom line. So, in my opinion, what the writer is saying here is that the politician is the one who won in this because they were able to write rules that made it seem like monopolies are illegal and competition is what you should have. They made the rules seem that way. So that way that they could get the vote of the little guy, the people who don't have the wealth. And in doing so, they win because they win the vote and they also get money from the people who are paying them to change the laws or make the laws more favorable for their companies. As Michael Perini notes in Democracy for the Few, progressive repression. In the 20th century, as in the centuries before, the men of wealth looked to the central government to do for them what they could not do for themselves, to repress democratic forces, limit competition, regulate the market to their advantage, and in other ways, bolster the process of capital accumulation. Basically, if you have money, you can make more money by paying people to do what you want them to do. Contrary to the view that giant trusts control everything, price competition with small companies in the 1900s was vigorous enough to cut the profits of various industries. Suffering from an inability to regulate prices, expand profits, and free themselves from this vexatious reformist laws of the state and local governments, big business began demanding action by the national government. As the utilities magnate Samuel Insull said, it was better to help shape the right kind of regulation than to have the wrong kind forced upon us. So this is a captain of industry saying basically, we do need regulation, so we need to tell them what the regulation is going to be. Right? That's what they're basically saying. You know how someone says, if I wanted your opinion, I'd tell you. That's basically what they're doing financially here. They saying the people asking for regulation, let's give them the regulation they deserve, the one that favors us. While the billionaire bankers and manufacturers who own representatives in Congress drafted the laws supposedly aiming at busting trust, the obvious targets of those laws simply changed their tactics. They restructured their complex trust into holding corporations and carried on much as before. As usual, the competition was left to its own devices. First, to discover the new game, and then how to play it. The public stigma, which became attached to the term trust at the beginning of the last century, explains why the public has not searched out the techniques of wealth building used by these past masters. Like masters of psyops, the rich may well have anticipated their reverse psychology campaign, which funded both sides of the debates. This is now standard operating procedure, SOP, for pushing controversial legislation through Congress. By making it uncomfortable for people to use trust, they will never learn the secrets. Genuine or not, the drama, sensationalist press campaigns political cartoons, and flowery oratory of the era, telling the American public strongly against this artificial entity. Even now, the most ordinary folks have a hard time seeing themselves associated with a trust, let alone creating one. Well, what do y'all think? Are they right about that? I mean, honestly, for myself, when I first heard about trust, I had a negative connotation of it too. I thought it was something that rich people use to hide their money. Mm, I've I've heard the term trust fund baby, and I've never heard it used in a positive way. So I think the writer here may be onto something. Maybe Mr. Charles is right about this. The 1900s was the era of the Industrial Revolution when we first got our first millionaires, and they did the most. I mean, they did the most. Some people were dying in those factories. Children were being maimed in those factories. Unalive. Sorry, TikTok. Sheesh. People were being unalived, and their body parts were being removed from them from the machinery. And the people who were becoming the first millionaires, they did not have a system in place to care for those children and people who were being harmed. In fact, if someone got sick and could not work, there was nothing. There was nothing. And then I think, um, and I could be mistaken at this, but I do believe it was Carnegie who owned the places where his workers worked. All about that, vertical integration, that horizontal and vertical integration, to whereas I own every single piece of what it takes to produce whatever it is, including the people and where they live. That will be like today, like we said in our water analogy, if you're selling bottles of water in the summertime, they not only own the water, the space, the place where the water comes out of the ground, they not only own the bottles, but they own the plastic plant that creates the bottle. And then they would own, um, you're out there selling the water bottle, but they would own the house you live in. So you sell the bottles and then you go home, and the house you live in, they own that too. And then the store next to your house where you get your food, they own that too. So basically, they were basically saying that there was no space for you as a worker. You couldn't do anything. If you got into an argument with somebody in the grocery store, that would get back to your boss at work. If you're arguing with your wife inside your apartment or your house or whatever, that argument could get back to your boss. So there was no wiggle room for the people, so basically began to oppress them and squeeze out that profit from the people. So I can see how if that era went that way, that the people would say, "Well, who did this?" And if trust people did it or trust babies, I mean, then yeah, I can see the negative connotation being attached to that. That totally makes sense. Hmm. Have we been on for an hour yet? Let's see. All right, let's see. All right, so we got a little bit further to go. I'll just keep on reading because there's a little bit further to go to the end of this section. I'll read to the end of this section. I don't know if it's still going to be the end of the chapter. All right. Nonetheless, students of trust who can keep an emotional distance from the events of yesteryear stand to gain a precious lesson. The instrument used by Rockefeller, Carnegie, Morgan, and others to amass their monopolistic power, upheld and expanded by their beneficiaries, has precisely the same shape, although not the same purpose or contents, as the one we examine in this book. The fact, perhaps more than any other, may help you. That fact, I'm sorry, That fact, perhaps more than any other, may help you understand why rich private interest and government agencies, which claim to curb them, keep such secrecy about the use of this powerful device, and why it is not taught in the schools that they fund. Ooh, that was a bar. That was a bar. Because we just said monopoly is when I own it, right? If I want to do everything about it, I tell you what to do. And they saying, I mean, it's called a public school. So if they're funding the school, why would they tell you that? That's a bar. And some, they assume the reason attorneys lack information about common law trust is the wealthy who control the curriculum, who have no motive to share their strategies. Well, that was an incomplete thought. Some assume the reason attorneys lack information about common law trust is the wealthy who control the curriculums have no motive to share their strategies. We do not favor or support monopolies or abuses of power by private interests any more than we do tyrannies or dictatorships by Caesars, kings, or congresses of people. Having and using a trust will neither ensure that your own behavior is ethical nor make up for any of the other flaws of character, intelligence, experience, or training. We would be we would be lax in our duty as educators and members of the community, though, if we downplayed or ignored the enormous potential for power which remains in this family business. This is precisely because it encourages those who care most about you to support your dreams and supplement your strengths with their own. The knights of Old England used their trust defensively as an impenetrable shield against the king. The robber barons of Wall Street turned theirs into weapons to clobber the competition. How you develop and use the power of trust you create largely depends on the scope of your purity. I'm sorry, largely depends on the scope and purity of your purpose. And neither of those is known or a fixed quantity. One fact is certain, though: just as surely as nature loathes a vacuum, if you fail to explore and exploit the blessings which life gives you, someone else will take them away. You can hide from them, bury them, surrender them, abuse them, ignore them, waste them, cry over them, or laugh at them. Or you can nurture them and those who contribute to them, develop them, protect them, add to them, share them, explore them, and maybe someday even grow to understand them. All right, that's the end of that section. Let me see how far we go. Chapter 5. Yeah, it ain't that much. Let's just keep going. I'll finish out this chapter. All right. Tribal power. Tribal power exists in current trust today, especially through the DuPont family, which has a shared interest in not only trust, but corporations. Also, partnerships and limited liability companies all across the world. Even though the DuPonts are not registered as a holding company of majority of stock, the family votes in blocks. Hmm? In blocks. This is how it controls many of the boards of trustees and boards of directors in various organizations throughout the world. Cataloged in a book titled The Rich and the Super Rich, the DuPont family is similar to the Rockefeller and all other major families. These power dynasties long ago discovered that voting as a unit is where political leverage remains. In other words, the tribal strength of agreement. Contrary to our belief that rugged individualism is almighty and desirable, the opposite is the truth. Collective agreements are what controls this world. A handful of conclaves developed and matured to take the leadership of our planet. Unfortunately, most groups are not strictly focused on the welfare of the people. They use financial leverage through group agreement. And this is the great power of the irrevocable common law trust, a force not available through the average statutory trust. The leverage of the united family available through the common law trust is what provides its unique place in the world. And as long as the United States Constitution and, and state constitutions secure our right to contract, the irrevocable common law trust stays, also giving the average middle class family collective leverage. The feudal system and common law trust. Although we cannot quote an exact source about the term common law, we can assume that common means to share, as in common good, sorry. In feudal England, the common people equally shared the land. Wait a minute. Wait, what? In England, in feudal England, the common people equally shared the land. Both the freeborn and the serfs cultivated strips of land known as cillions, which were 220 yards long and 5.5 yards wide. Researchers believe that there was an effort to give each household an equal chance to cultivate some of the good land in the township with the poor. And thus these cillions were scattered. Because they were scattered, the land became common to the people. The common, hold on, I just can't read past that. Hold on, Mr. Charles. In their explanation for common law, first they start out by saying I don't know, which is fine. I don't mind that. But then give their understanding of it, and their understanding is that the land was common to all, but they just spent time explaining to us that during the feudal system, the lords owned the land, and you did what they said or you starved. That don't sound like everybody owning it. That don't sound common to me. But whatever. I'll keep reading. The common law is based on shared resources. We have all heard the term feudal overlord. That is the leader or overall landowner. The term landlord comes from this tradition. In that time, though, the feudal lord cared about the get. Sorry about that. Hold on, let me read this first. Okay. Yeah, see, this is okay. Anyway, I'm just reading to you. In that time, though, the feudal lord cared about the get better deal and in the fair distribution of the resources. The people worked the land. Although considered little better than animals to the feudal lord, his serfs were an asset, without which the land could not become productive. Thus, while there were taxes, it was not the norm to abuse the serfs. There was an idea that if a person is tied to the land, he is enslaved. This also allowed them, though, to be secure in their homes. The idea they could not leave to work some other land may or may not have been a matter of concern. In viewing the feudal age through modern sensibilities, we may not see reality as the serfs saw it. Mr. Charles is trying to talk me into believing that the serfs didn't mind. But Mr. Charles earlier just explained to me that the serfs got so upset with their situation that they were willing to get on a boat and come to a completely different land to get away from it. Just saying, Mr. Charles, you're confusing me now. All right, let's go down. Even in America, eventually the slave owners came to realize that if the slave was well kept, he or she not only lived longer, but became more cooperative. By the 1850s, many slaveholders had become more aware of the need to increase food allotments, maintain more sanitary living conditions, and provide adequate clothing and shelter for their slaves. Note 33, Salzman, Lionel Smith, Encyclopedia of African American Culture and History, Cornell West editions, Volume 5, Simon and Schuster, and Prentice Hall International, New York, Slavery, page 2464. This is in contrast to today, where corporate management disassociates itself from the worker. It takes no personal responsibility for his or her welfare. People are discarded when of no lo- People are discarded when of use no longer. This may be through downsizing or retirement. The worker is then supported by the state in the form of unemployment and medical benefits. Instead of an overlord who has an interest in the worker's welfare, we have a near machine like mechanism that handles people with indifference and sometimes downright neglect. For example, welfare programs and child services. As society evolved, the idea of sharing became less centralized until shared resources is mainly within the family. Without the support of the family, Without the support of the family, members do not have a firm foundation in life to carry them into new adventures and to give them the courage to learn and take the necessary risks to grow. The idea of any trust is to provide the financial basis so the family members can contribute to society from a position of security instead of uncertainty. When when you must focus on gathering enough to simply make it through a week or a month, there is not much time to devote to helping others, contributing to the community, or developing yourself. I'm glad the writer recognizes this because I was waiting to say that myself. They started off the beginning of this book with you just need 50,000, as if though debt doesn't exist for most Americans. But anyway, those who have built up this family power base for generations are those who are in power today. Their generations, for generations to come, to be in the position to manage the common good, families must set the foundation now to have enough leverage in the future to be of benefit to this world. The ulterior motive. Besides addressing the mundane, legal, and philosophical reasons for creating a trust, we are taking a massive departure from the familiar. The presumably safe tradition of legal and historical facts will now segue into what many of you will find quote unquote out there. Rest assured, though, there is good reason for our doing so. Found hidden in the antiquity of history is one of the hottest political footballs of all time. This subject remains questionable even today. Without bringing it to your attention, though, you would miss the background of what compels the super rich to use trust. Beneficiaries be damned. The real purpose of trust for the super rich is to accumulate and protect assets for themselves. Ancient rulers who literally took the servants and treasures to the grave with them could, were they here, but look in awe and envy at the boldness of the scheme. The rich are motivated to create wealth so they can reincarnate back into their own bloodline and thus inherit their resource structure. They not only keep up their material comfort, but also their leverage. Okay. Because of the controversial nature of the subjects of reincarnation, and okay, so this is where they said they were going out there. Yeah, because I just read that line and was like, what? So, okay, thanks, babe. I wasn't reading the comments. My wife said doing good. Thanks, babe. Uh, And let me look over here at the TikTok. Anthony liked the live. Thanks, Anthony. I appreciate you, bro. 5 new messages? Sheesh. I definitely was not looking over here at the messages. All right. Oh, that's nothing. That's the AI. All right. Back at it. What was that? Oh, I was saying, that last line I read, that did seem a little out there, but they did preface it with, "We about to take it there." So, reincarnation. Here we go. Dang, lost my spot. What was that at? Yes. The rich are motivated to create wealth so they can reincarnate back into their own bloodline and thus inherit their own resource structure. They not only keep the material comfort, but also their leverage. Because of the controversial nature of the subjects of reincarnation and other esoteric themes in general, we feel that we should address these beliefs more fully in Appendix H. Here you will find the more amazing details of some of the rituals of major organizations and leaders of our world, and understand more thoroughly why they have such intense motive to accumulate wealth. This one area is probably the demarcation line between those who seek power and those who choose to live their lives to the fullest capacity without concern about how or when they come back, or even if they do. In bringing this point of view into light, we're not offering or suggesting it is correct. Only it is probably a strong motivator for some. All right, that was the end of chapter 5. So they just teased the idea that um, they're about to talk about their understanding of why people try so desperately to reincarnate. I mean, to amass wealth, and they're teasing that the reason behind it is because of reincarnation. That some people believe that they will reincarnate so that if they control wealth, at least enough wealth and assets, when they do reincarnate, they go right back to their wealth. Okay. Again, this is my opinion of the reading. This is not no type of advice, but we'll get back to it. We will get back to the reading tomorrow and read some more about the art of passing the buck and maybe get into some reincarnation. All right, guys. I'll see y'all later.
Okay, you take it.